Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We got a good one for you as always. Got a packed show to get into. On the show, we are still talking about some pretty interesting news coming out of Russia. Vladimir Putin is in control, it seems, in Moscow, and is apparently trying to punish some of the allies of Yevgeny Prigozhin, of course, the man who almost overthrew his government over the weekend. How is that going? Well, maybe not as well as he would like, as some of Prigozhin's connections are proving a little bit difficult to dislodge. We'll give you the full details at the top. Coming up as well down the pike, a possible nationwide UPS strike beginning in possibly around a month. That's the deadline for the contract, August 30th. It seems like the contract stuff there is not going well. The union is not happy with what the UPS is putting forward. It could be a potentially devastating strike for the economy, but a huge strike in the history and the power of labor. So definitely something we wanted to get into. We also have a Washington Post report coming out kind of acknowledging something that we really already knew, which is that the DeSantis campaign isn't going anywhere. It's not in a good spot, guys. It is going to go to the shitter, frankly. Also, Lula, the president of Brazil, kind of talking, just kind of a classic lovable moment for him. That is kind of telling you something that we all really know is true, especially about some of those people in Southern Europe. We'll get into it. Anyway, we have to start with the top. Putin. It is a full palace coup type situation in Russia. You obviously know Yevgeny Prigozhin, Wagner Group head. He tried to essentially overthrow the Putin regime. Tried to, what Putin called an armed mutiny. What Prigozhin called a march for justice. Obviously didn't want to shying away from the coup branding there, which I think is the interesting thing in and of itself. You also have what is a pretty remarkable kind of 24-hour period over the weekend where the Wagner PMC turns away from the Ukrainian border and then marches north and east to Moscow, stops about halfway there when Lukashenko, president of Belarus, comes in, says we're going to need to let's make a deal here, let's get in front of each other, I guess. And apparently they didn't even talk. Apparently Lukashenko, which is the intermediary, said, okay, Prigozhin, Wagner Group head, going out to Belarus. We're going to disband the Wagner Group, and we're going to essentially give them the chance to either fight for the Russian army or go home or go to Belarus be with Prigozhin. But yeah, Belarus largely viewed to be a very friendly country for Putin, but Putin apparently was not taking this lightly at all whatsoever. This is Anton Troyanovsky in the New York Times. So it's going to be a pretty big deal. Again, who gets punished for this Russian leadership, in the Russian leadership? And there's a lot of people that we're looking at. One of the top people, though, is going to be General Sergei Surovikin, a senior military official whom Prigozhin, in his critiques of the Russian army, praised what Surovikin was doing. I guess this guy's not as bad as, someone like Sergei Shoigu, who is the head of the whole MOD, Ministry of Defense there. So yeah, it does remain to be seen exactly what is going on here, because it's unclear. But the rumor is, and this could be a little bit spicy here. Surovikin. Everyone's looking to see, is he going to come out and support? Is he going to go against? He apparently knew about the rebellion beforehand. He knew what they were trying to do beforehand, and he still, again, eventually posted a video to Telegram and was like, we have to stick with Putin here. This is not going to work in the long term. Some blogs said that they were also investigating military service members with ties to Prigozhin, but those reports cannot be independently confirmed. Putin fed speculation about a broader crackdown on Tuesday evening in a closed-door meeting with Russian media figures at the Kremlin. In the meeting, he presented himself as a leader in total control and said he was delving into Prigozhin's business contracts with the Russian Defense Ministry, seeing maybe who was giving him some extra tips on the side. And because we saw some reporting last night talking about how it appears that this guy Surovikin was not the only one who knew what was going on inside. There were some moles who were apparently much closer to the Prigozhin side of things than the Putin side of things, and that is something that Putin completely wanted to get out of. And again, if you're looking at a fight here, it's very interesting to see the U.S. involvement. It's honestly kind of hard for me to believe that the U.S. is ever completely, uninvolved in any situation around the world. But this one, it does seem to be that they are actually quite uninvolved. So, did they know about this? And especially, it seems they did know about it ahead of time as well, or at least had an idea about it. But the question is, who do we look at? Is it best again for our interests? And I think it's going to be very interesting. It was very kind of weird and kind of classic lib moment, so to speak, is to see certain people, certain media figures coming out and be like, because this enemy is my friend. Again, it's such damaging foreign policy mindset that, it may work in the movies or whatever, but a lot of times that enemy, that friend that you help, you use to kill your enemy, also oftentimes for the United States at least, becomes a way worse enemy that we have to deal with down the road. So with that being said, it was a really, really interesting thing to see some of this reporting kind of coming out, and it seems to be an investigation that I would characterize as not yet complete at the moment. On Tuesday, Syria, where Wagner mercenaries have operated extensively, released a photograph of Russian deputy foreign minister with Syrian officials, saying the two sides held talks as part of a regular political consultation between two friendly countries. He flew to the southern Russian region of Dagestan, Putin did, to discuss domestic tourism, praising the expansion of the local brandy industry. State media released a video with him talking to the crowd, saying, he is very, again, popular with the public. Everyone's loving him. He's cheering against a strongman dictator type image, right? Back in Moscow, the nature of Putin's long-term response to the rebellion, a matter of guesswork, members of the Russian elite were scrambling to demonstrate their loyalty and disavow some past ties to Prigozhin, which is very, very interesting. Oleg Machayev, a member of the Russian parliament and longtime pro-Kremlin political consultant, said it's a pretty highly convoluted question as who should get punished for their connection to the Wagner leader, said Oleg Matveyev, whatever. Yeah, it's a guy named Oleg who's in the Russian parliament. That's all you essentially need to know for this situation. But when it comes down to it, it is going to be a very intense situation. And again, it's one of the classic old adages that we see time and time again about Russia is, it's just a very closed curtain, and then you see the bones of the loser, fly out from under the curtain, and then who has won, who's victorious. Right now Putin, because he has control of the state media, so the state reigns, seems to be very much in control, but we don't know what is going on behind the scenes, what's going on with the elites. Some of these elites, they definitely did have some pretty past ties to Prigozhin, and is that going to detract from them, or are they going to be getting together and say, hey, let's finish this job, or let's at least just put pressure and go to Putin and get him to wind down, for example, the Ukraine war? Matveyev acknowledged working with Prigozhin about a decade ago, but said he stopped after the partnership. After he concluded that Prigozhin was a, quote, mentally unstable person, unquote. Prigozhin built a web of connections through catering very fancy events in St. Petersburg in the 1990s. And he recently, again, worked with General Surovikin in Syria, where Wagner forces were fighting. And he was, again, one of those people they viewed as a bellwether. If this guy comes out in support of Wagner, Putin is really screwed. He didn't, and off Prigozhin goes to Belarus, right? So where do we go from here? It is a very interesting question that, honestly, again, as I talked about with James Weld on the last show, we can't really say for sure because it's Russia. We're not experts. We're not on the ground. We don't know the intelligence, all that kind of stuff. But it seems to be that this situation is very, very much active. A lot of questions are being asked, mostly by Putin. He's kind of retracing the steps here, and it seems like things could get interesting, and that it definitely isn't over just because of the incredible concentration of a lot of people that are, we're part of the mainstream, mainline kind of Kremlin government and military apparatus here that were deeply tied, or at least knew about this rebellion ahead of time, which is definitely not something that Vladimir Putin wants to see or hear in any way, shape, or form. So with that being said, it's time to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. But yeah, be sure to hit that up. It's SWRN702@gmail.com. We got some pretty good, interesting questions of the weekend about Prigozhin, but they were just completely, made irrelevant by the fact that the situation was really over by the time the weekend ended. So that is a very interesting dynamic that, again, we can't even only really guess what's going on. Be really interesting, be a fly on the wall, but, I would not want anyone to see me because I feel like they just kill me, on site. It would be a very, very scary situation, to say the least. But talk about another crazy situation. The largest single employer strike in American history now appears inevitable. So said Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien late Wednesday, after the leader of the union representing the shipping giant UPS quit negotiating with the company representatives after giving them a Friday deadline to act responsibly and exchange a stronger economic proposal for 340,000 full and part-time workers, the largest single employer strike in U.S. history. It's going to be absolutely remarkable stuff. And again, this is really remarkable because this is what the Teamsters were built for, or, retooled themselves for in the first place. They've been long time an atrophied union and completely controlled by the Hoffa acolytes, the Hoffaites, I guess you could say, of the Teamsters up until, I think it was James P. Hoffa III. That was the most recent person in charge. There was a lot of corruption. I think it was put under some sort of special measures by the government. And now, what are we seeing? We are seeing a reform president. We're seeing Sean O'Brien and a really incredible, there was Teamsters for a Democratic Union was the caucus that formed up, in really into outrage also because of the UPS contract that was back in 2018. That was just a complete giveaway that was voted down by the members because it was such a giveaway to UPS, but it was imposed through special rules on the members anyway up until this point. And of course, in the middle of that contract run from about 2018 to 2023, that's when they kicked out the old concessionary business union close to the boss, union boss, and put in Sean O'Brien. So the Teamsters had initially given the company a week to propose a better offer, but UPS executives couldn't make it one more day without insulting and ignoring union leaders and rank-and-file filers as negotiators resumed on Wednesday. The union said in a statement. Common Dreams reported earlier this month that 97% of UPS workers represented by the Teamsters voted to authorize the nationwide strike if the deal wasn't reached with management by July 31st, beginning of August. The world's largest delivery company that raked in more than $100 billion in revenue last year has made it clear to the union workforce that it has no desire to reward or respectfully compensate UPS Teamsters for their labor and sacrifice, Wednesday's statement alleged. During the past week, UPS returned an appalling counter-proposal to the union's financial package, offering minuscule raises and wage cuts to traditional cost of living adjustments. Again, we got the cost of living adjustments, which was a big problem for the UPS workers, and a big problem again for the UPS workers was the tier system, which is after a certain point the company draws the line and it's okay, we're going to give you less. The benefit faucet has turned off after 1991, and then if you're a long time worker working after 1991 or whatever, This is a random number I threw out there. You will not get the same pension. You will not get the same time off, et cetera, et cetera. And that was something that the previous general secretary of the Teamsters wholeheartedly accepted because, just out of weakness. They don't care about members' families. UPS doesn't want to pay up. He added their actions and insults at the bargaining table have proven they're just another corporation that wants to keep the money at the top. Working people who bust their asses all day, every single day, do not matter, not to UPS. So this is a clip from one of them who is preparing to strike.
It's very difficult because when you're working like all night or, the graveyard shift, you tend to sleep during the day and you don't really get time with your family or with your kids. A lot of my coworkers and peers, you can just see it on their face. They look angry and honestly depressed, a lot of them feel like they're stuck, they need the healthcare and the benefits, but like the pay sucks, or they've invested so much time with the company and they're still not full-time. A lot of people are angry.
When you think of good middle-class jobs, you probably think of UPS, but the shipping behemoth has a secret. While full-time delivery drivers are the face of UPS, it's the part-time workers like Cesar Mendoza who are the heart of the $100 billion company.
I actually, in one of my first jobs, I worked as a camp counselor, right? And there was the first time I came into the camp, there was this guy who was like 26, had a very, very tough life. He kind of just sat out in the woods, working with the kids, doing nature, stuff like that. And he was just like, I was talking to him. I was like, getting my, feet into the camp, whatever. And he was just like, other people I met that day were just like, oh, this job sucks. This job sucks. But he was just like happy to be there. And that was because he worked in one of these warehouses. These really brutal conditions. I don't know, it was Amazon, UPS, all the same really, because they all got to go by the same industry standards. And he just told me it was brutal every day, lifting, putting up, stacking boxes, always on the clock, always under pressure, always risking your putting your body, putting your health on the line so that people get their whatever the hell they ordered. And that is one of the biggest dynamics that we're seeing. The people who are getting served and the underclass of people who are serving. And those are exactly the same people who feel like they've completely gotten excluded, and rightfully so, out of political life. And they are just getting clearly fed up with the bullshit. And they're not people who are going to be, oh, I'm voting for Joe Biden. Oh, I'm turning on MSNBC. I'm getting furious over the fact that Trump indicted. They don't have maybe, a lot of these, especially the older UPS drivers, they maybe not have all the same like woke beliefs, but they are the critical mass of people in this country who, if anything good is to ever happen, they need to be politically activated. And that is why, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party especially, the Democratic Party, obviously, they are not going to save us in any way. It's so pointless to fully get fruitfully invested, one way or the other, to get fully invested in any kind of Democratic campaign, because you're not going to get anything from it. They actively hate everyday people. They actively hate everyday people. They look down their nose at, everyday people working in these kind of jobs. They actively, if it's not the fact that they're stupid, it's the fact that, they're probably Trump supporters. They probably stop voting for us anyway, and we shouldn't care because we need to, focus on, formerly Republican suburbanites. And that is where they want to put their party, because the Democratic Party, they're happy to completely ignore any sort of outside interest that's not a corporation or some sort of lobbying force. They are, they have no economic or structural interest, because it's a whole continuous cycle of money from the consultants to the campaigns, and the corporations pay the salaries of the candidates. And it's a completely continuous cycle where every single economic need is met internally within that cycle. And everyday people, workers, are just completely left out. And, of course, they have every 4 years to try and go to everyday normal people and try to convince them they could possibly represent them. But again, more and more people are just frankly just not buying it anymore. And if there's anything anything good that's about to happen, this strike needs to be successful. These people need to win. They need to show the corporations of this world, the people that are causing mass suffering and pain the world over by jacking up prices in the wake of the pandemic, making people choose between heating or eating all over, the developed world, and God knows what the hell they've been doing to the developing world. These are the people who are doing it. They need to, if anything good is not going to happen, it's not going to come from Joe Biden stopping fascism again and defeating Donald Trump in November. It's going to come from a UPS strike that, ensures a major, this is the largest single employer strike in American history. They need massive wins here. They need, the salary that sets the standard for the next, negotiation after that, and negotiation after another company down the block. They need to raise the standard of the market. These organized workers, organized political forces are the only thing that can counter the force of organized corporations, organized money, and that class solidarity. Workers need class solidarity of their own, and that is why it's one of the most important, if not the most important story to progress in the country right now.
My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps. Make SWR content better. And thank you so much for listening.
As we wrap up here, we got a really pretty interesting report. Oh, we're not really wrapping up, really halfway through. Come on. We're on to our third of 4 stories here. And this one, I almost kind of hesitated to do this in a certain way. It's because we're essentially telling people, I think, a lot of things that they already know. And this is, this line kind of speaks for the first line, the lead of the story, the opening line of the Washington Post story here kind of speaks for it all. The primary was effectively over for many voters who came to hear Donald Trump's speech at the GOP Women's Luncheon this week in Concord, New Hampshire. Again, it's less religious, more of an outsider state, white working class voters. Trump dominates here easily. Trump all the way. Don't even ask me about anyone else, says Suzanne Perezi, a 62-year-old office manager. Or Pesarezi. Jeez, with the names. So 40 miles south, at a town hall with Ron DeSantis, plenty of others were convinced the party should move on from the former president. Again, this is probably 20% of the party, and that's a good estimate for him these days. He's going down as more and more people are kind of going in the race, drawing fire from him. I have a non-top choice, and that's Donald Trump, declared the former Republican state lawmaker Bill Ohm. But like many around him, Ohm wasn't sold on the Florida governor, or anyone else for that matter. I could vote for DeSantis if nobody else got traction. Again, that right there is why Ron DeSantis will fail, and is going to fail, is failing, will fail, has failed in the past, and will fail again. Because when it comes down to it, it is simple mathematics. Donald Trump is the overwhelming favorite, has led the party for 4 years. It's just, people, Republicans all over the country, used car dealership owners have sweared a blood oath to this man. They are undyingly loyal. They're not going to give him up in any stretch, any way, any possibility. But there is a certain chunk of people that can peel off. There's a little bit more people who are uncertain. There are people who really didn't like what happened on January 6th. And those are people like this guy, this Don Hallenbeck, this business owner. Again, upper class people with economic security, people with more skin in the game, people with more education as well. Those are people who are going to be, I don't know, when it comes to putting someone back in who's crazy like Donald Trump. This guy, probably Don Hallenbeck, is just someone who's not too crazy, wants to keep taxes low, doesn't want any of this wokeness, but nothing too crazy on the wokeness either. And he is somebody who, this is the people. These are the people who Ron DeSantis has to win. But Ron DeSantis is so unlikable, so unappealing, so bad as a political figure that he's fundamentally failing to do that. He has, got his little own base of kind of mostly, a lot of internet freaks as well as some sort of that kind of college-educated upper-class Republican slice. But that slice is getting smaller and smaller the more candidates jump in the race. And the fact that more candidates are jumping in the race shows that Ron DeSantis, it's kind of like, almost a kind of a cart before the horse or horse before the cart type situation, chicken or the egg. It's like Ron DeSantis has gotten in the race. People are still getting in the race. That means he just can't, scare people out enough. He hasn't asserted his own dominance enough, on the field in kind of a very, toxically masculine way, I guess, given it is a Republican primary after all, to get the rest of the, like the Tim Scotts of the world, the Mike Pences, the Doug Burgums. I don't know why I said Doug Burgum, but, most people are probably like, who? But yeah, just again, all these jokers getting him out of the way. The Chris Christies of the world, for example, he needs to be the only Trump candidate because he's so bad as a politician. He can't be the only Trump candidate, the only anti-Trump candidate, the only alternative to Trump, and that's the only shot he has to win. And the fact that somebody like Don Hollenbeck, who is saying, I don't like Trump. And again, someone like Bill Ohm, I have a non-top choice, and that's Donald Trump, saying, I don't want Donald Trump. But Ron DeSantis, whose whole thing is I'm the alternative to Trump, is getting just a blank stare. He's been, look, guys, waving my arms. We need someone more serious. He's running against Trump. He's the leader. He's the, standard bearer to take on Trump at this time. At least that's what he's cast himself as. And the fact that he is failing to convince these type of people, business owners, former Republican lawmakers, the kind of petty bourgeois, I feel incredibly weird using that term, of the Republican Party, as opposed to, the general, the proletariat of the Republican Party is the Trump supporters. Like, the fact that those guys are like, Ron DeSantis, he's too weird. The kind of, not the elite, but like the, secondary class, again, the petty bourgeois is the best word I can probably think of to describe these people. Like, the business owners, former Republican New Hampshire lawmakers. Those people are presented with this clear alternative and are saying, no, that is devastating for Ron DeSantis here at this point. He says about the governor, he will have a tough time finding his way back to the middle in a general election, which is another hugely interesting point and kind of goes with what I'm saying for a while, and something that people have really been very afraid to admit, is that not only is Trump way more electable, obviously, in the Republican primary, but because Ron DeSantis came off like a freak on the culture war stuff, talking about litter boxes in schools, again, getting people, the moment you start talking about girls, okay, all you have to say about a Republican, if you're Ron DeSantis in girls sports, is saying, hey, what, guys, I don't think that girls, people who are, have the biological components of boys should be allowed to compete in girls sports. And people are like, yeah, okay, a lot of people on the Democratic side, I think, rightfully would have, stood up to that, interrogated that more. But, electorally speaking, that is literally all he had to do. But then he started the whole, I like to call it the litter box brigade, going around talking about anything from critical race theory to gender ideology all the time, nonstop, woke mind virus. It's just people, that is so weird to so many people, beyond 20% of the Republican Party. And if you're really excited by that stuff, sorry, you're in that 20%. I don't know if any of them are listening to the show. I'd be pretty surprised, but those people, some of you may know some of these people. They are in. I know I do. Like, they're in that 20%. They're like, I mean, hey, I want to go to these sports games. Drop your pants. Let's see what really kind of genitals you have if you want to play in one of these sports games. Like, people listen to that and they're like, you are crazy. I mean, this business owner and Don Hollenbeck is like, he's gonna find have a tough way finding his way back to the middle, and he's like, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about this crazy culture war stuff that has not only made him weird in the Republican primary, but has not really only gonna make him weird in the Republican primary, as it already has, because these people, the way, the kind of upper class, richer Republicans, the petty bourgeois Republicans, they think the most about electability. So they're like, if you're doing all this weird stuff, then people aren't going to vote for you, and I don't like that. So you can't be the alternative to Trump that you are clearly trying to push yourself as. You're just a really massive failure all the way around. It's a really rough situation because you got, not only do you have that dynamic of just him being just an incredibly bad politician, but Trump is literally in the process of getting indicted, which sounds bad, but in a Republican primary, it is gold because, again, the DOJ, is essentially on the same par with CNN and MSNBC to these people. So they're just like, whatever. Good for him. We got to actually stand up for him. Ron DeSantis, what are you doing challenging him? Get out of there. That aspect on top of it, too, makes it literally impossible. So it is a really kind of remarkable situation there, kind of coming out of this. Let's go now to our last story. DeSantis, what a failure of a campaign. But Lula da Silva made the news in the Washington Post. This is by Annabella Timsit. She writes, France, the land of fine wine and delicately aged cheese. Italy, where the risotto is as creamy as the tiramisu. Both countries are known around the world for the quality of their food and the passion and know-how of the people who make it. To the president of Brazil, though, the food in both places was, quote, not that great. Again, this is why he's the best. This is Lula Inácio da Silva, everyone. The guy who survived a coup, survived a false imprisonment by illegal, I should say, really, right-wing forces, allowed back to run by the Supreme Court, beat the fascist Trump supporter Bolsonaro, and is now back in office. He's going, actually the only world leader who's talking any kind of just logic and sense on Ukraine. And so Da Silva, a former union leader who won a third term in office last year, said he rarely eats well abroad. His apparently serious complaints about palace food abroad echoed the old joke: the food is terrible and the portions are too small. Everything is restricted. There isn't a tray for you to choose and take what you want, he said. Everything is sophisticated and sometimes we don't even know what it is. This is kind of the attitude, the tone of the Washington Post here being like, French food is the most respected food in the world. But it's like this dude fought a military dictatorship. He fought someone trying to put him in prison again when he was like 80 years old. I mean, he's not 80 years old. He's like probably 60, 70 years old. He survived a lot. He is, I feel like the consummate man of the people, one of the most popular leaders of the 21st century that we have seen especially in the global South, which is something that I think a lot of these people aren't even taking into consideration. His relationship to the global South is really different than it is into kind of the elite, kind of the establishment of the West and, the developed world, these OECD countries. But he made the comments just a few days after returning from diplomatic visits to Italy, the Vatican, and France for meetings with President Sergio Mattarella of Italy, French President Emmanuel Macron, among other officials. The foreign ministries of France and Italy did not immediately respond for comment early Wednesday. And again, this is really kind of a interesting one here. Lula is a divisive figure in Brazil. So much. He was in prison as part of a sprawling corruption scandal before being freed in 2019. Again, this does not say why they overturned the conviction. You would never know from reading the Washington Post. It's because he literally was locked up by a judge who, by the way, Glenn Greenwald, probably one of the best things he's ever done is get a hold of the chats between this judge talking to other people, being like, we got to lock Lula up so he can't run against Bolsonaro and so that Bolsonaro could get to power in the first place. And that's exactly what they did. These documents came to light. The Supreme Court ruled the conviction was politically motivated. It was, again, a completely politically motivated partisan conviction of a former leader. This is, again, the stuff that, Republicans talking about Trump could only dream of. This is clear evidence, texts that were leaked about what they were trying to do. And again, he was in prison as part of a sprawling corruption scandal. And he was just freed in 2019. Isn't that great? He won re-election last year with the slimmest margin in Brazil's history. Again, for most of his career, he was one of the most popular world leaders in the entire world. And I mean, now it's not the same as it was, all the, intense smearing of him by right-wing Brazilian media, but he is still out there. The Workers' Party is out there, doing what they do, and, pissing off some really pretty awful, snotty, not specifically about the Washington Post writer, but just, again, this entire establishment force kind of in the process, which is really a joy to see. All right, we may have a little bonus episode for you on Thursday. There may be another episode already out by the time that you're listening to this, but we'll definitely be back on Friday. It's Newsflash.